The applause in the auditorium is deafening. Arav is standing under the bright lights, holding the biggest award of his career. By all external measures, he has reached the absolute pinnacle of success. But if you look down at the front row, right in the center, there is one empty chair you actually get to live. It is a quiet tragedy of growing up. We often only understand exactly what it costs to build our lives when the person who paid for it is no longer around to hear us say thank you. When Arav was 12 years old, he didn't see a hero. He saw a man with soil-stained clothes and worn-out slippers. His father, Ramesh, pushed a wooden cart through the streets every morning before sunrise, selling vegetables. Ramesh always dropped Arav off at school, parking far from the gate. But one morning, the wheel snapped. The cart sank into the mud directly in front of the main entrance, right as a group of students walked by and started laughing at the vegetable seller's son. Arav dropped his head and ran inside without looking back. Ramesh didn't say a word, but the next morning, and every morning after that, he parked 2 streets away. A child's comfort usually comes with a hidden price tag. It is paid by a parent who willingly makes themselves invisible to spare their kid a moment of embarrassment. Think of this as an invisible ledger. To keep the assets column, Arav's daily life, stable and growing, Ramesh quietly absorbed the liabilities. When money was tight, he simply skipped dinner, telling his wife he had already eaten at the market. One rainy evening, Arav woke up thirsty and walked out of his bedroom. He found his father sitting in the dim light, carefully using a needle to stitch up a massive tear in his only pair of shoes. A few days later, Arav woke up to find a brand new pair of school shoes sitting next to his bed. He put them on, happy with the gift, and never asked how his father managed to buy them. Children operate on a simple economic model. They see the new shoes, the paid school fees, the full dinner plates. They measure love by what they receive, completely unaware of the deficit their parents take on to make that math work. This dynamic scales up. When Arav turned 18, he was accepted into a prestigious engineering college in another city. The tuition fees were completely out of reach. Relatives told Ramesh to let it go. Ramesh ignored them. He took the only property he owned, a small patch of inherited farmland, and quietly signed it away. He liquidated his entire safety net to fund his son's ambition, simply telling Arav to study well. College changed Arav. He acquired new friends, modern clothes, and big ambitions. He eventually launched a business, moved into a luxury apartment, and started traveling internationally. When his father called, the response was usually a quick, "I'm busy, I'll call later." Later rarely came. Ramesh never complained. He just got older, his hair turning completely white as he sat in his small house every evening, looking at his phone, waiting for it to ring. As Arav climbed higher and higher up the ladder of success, his perspective shifted. When you are entirely focused on the view from the top, it is remarkably easy to ignore the foundation holding you up. One winter morning, a phone call finally broke through Arav's schedule. His mother was crying. Arav dropped everything and rushed back to a painfully quiet hospital room filled with the soft beeping of monitors. Ramesh looked fragile. His hands still carried the rough marks of decades of labor. But when he opened his eyes and saw Arav, there was no anger about missed calls. He just smiled weakly and said, "My son, you came." While cleaning out the house after the funeral, Arav found an old metal box tucked beneath his father's bed. Inside were dozens of carefully folded papers, childhood drawings, old report cards, every birthday card he had ever made, and a small, worn diary. The entries tracked Arav's entire life, but the final page had no date. In uneven handwriting, Ramesh had written, "I don't pray that my son becomes rich. I pray he never has to choose between feeding his child and feeding himself. If one day he forgets my name, I hope he never forgets my values." Sitting on the floor with the diary, the weight of the last 40 years settles in. Ramesh had quietly transferred character, discipline, and a capacity for sacrifice, assets that never appeared on a bank statement, but defined everything Arav had become. Which brings us back to the auditorium, the bright lights, and the heavy silence of that one empty chair in the front row. Arav steps up to the microphone, his voice trembling. He credits his entire career to a man who spent 40 years absorbing the heat, so his son could stand under these lights. If the person who built your foundation is still around, do not wait for a dramatic realization. Call them, sit with them, validate the quiet things they gave up while they can still hear your voice. Because no matter how many awards you win or how high you climb, every achievement feels terribly incomplete if the person who believed in you first isn't there to see it.